for giving Lynn a little extra time to get here. All right, call to order for the Berlin Finance Committee meeting. Open session public meetings are subject to being recorded. Your image and voice will be recorded. All right, our first order of business, the minutes. So we have a motion.
I'll make a motion, they look good.
I'll second it.
All right, anybody have any discrepancies on them?
I think there was something fixed. Was it this time?
Not this
Oh, that was
time.
last time. Yeah,
Last time.
no, everything is fine. Yeah, great from my perspective.
All right, so roll call, Scott, aye.
Mary, I.
Julie, I.
Shane, aye.
Cliff, aye.
All right, pass 5-0. All right, excellent. Unless you have something else to get.
I have two quick items of business, and then that means when this is done, then I'm done too. So I'll fill you in. Well, the first was to just let you know that one select board member mentioned that perhaps we should move to a hybrid format. That is for you all to decide, but that was mentioned at the meeting Monday night, so I did want to bring that up. If that's something you wanted to do, I would recommend 218 because it does have a better setup with the 3 tables than here. We could also show presentations a bit better because they would not have the, I keep calling it pixelation. What is it, the flashing or flickering or what?
Yeah,
Blue
Whatever.
screen, blue lighting, I don't know.
Yeah, it's just the flicker because it's a refresh rate on the TV.
Yeah, and I could run that meeting so you wouldn't have to worry about anybody else having to do it. But just to put that on your radar. Also, one of the things June and I have been discussing, and this will come back when we talk about fire and police, is combining part-time and full-time wages into one line item. There is flow back and forth, particularly on the fire side, and I think it makes sense because what's happening is we're having to do either reserve fund transfers or hope and cross our fingers that we make it to May to do a transfer within a payroll line item, which doesn't make
No.
a whole lot of sense.
Absolutely.
And to take that one step further, in the 26 budget, I would love it if we could perhaps get to a personnel and an expense line item per department. So just throwing that out.
Okay, so wages, like
So
first.
2 line items per budget. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, 'cause that's what we do with our
salary
salon or P&L.
wages
Yeah,
line
salary
item
wages. Yeah,
and an
I like
expense
that.
line
Yeah, oh
item.
God, yeah.
I think the more you break it down,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand the transparency piece of it, but there are other ways to do another sheet where you can actually break down, and we have that data with the individual information, but to do a roll-up, it just allows the flexibility as things change in the department over the year to be able to move the money a bit
Yep.
on the wages side especially,
It was the gnomes.
or if expenses are broken out. Now that you have, I think, a town administrator in this position who's monitoring the budget, I think having less line items
Yes.
is better.
Absolutely.
Gives you a little more flexibility.
So
So,
still have to do the budget breakdown when they submit the budget, it's just.
Correct.
More granular, just but
Yeah.
but you take the roll-up basically
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
town meeting and do a payroll and an expense per department. So not to change things radically this year, but just to put that on your radar to kind of chew on that perhaps for 26, maybe we can talk about moving in that direction.
So Kristen and June, one question about that proposal, which is if you've got loaded and unloaded positions, right, Ben? Is it going to make it harder to do year on year or to do
They still have to break it down in the budget paperwork that we do.
the supporting paperwork?
The
is
supporting
gonna show
paperwork,
it.
correct. It's just you only show the roll-up number when you do the vote at town meeting.
Right, that's all you need to know.
I mean, we could still track it separately if we wanted to, but it would still be like a lump together.
Shouldn't have to get that granular at a vote.
In my experience, most communities do that or have moved to that, having just a payroll and expense line item. Some,
So, yeah, town vote, it wouldn't.
You don't need to get that granular.
I'm thinking about people looking at last year's, this year's, what is it? There would be a transition time where you're not doing the part-time, but aside from that year, would it make it hard to interpret what's happening?
No, and like I said, I could do it on my end of it. We could still have it separated if we wanted to, just if anybody wanted it. But right now, I have to add them together anyway to do state reporting.
right? And I think when the
Yeah.
departments present their budget, they could present that breakdown to
Sure.
the FinCom, and they would obviously be providing that to June and
Yeah, I
myself.
think that would be important,
Yeah,
of course.
Oh, definitely. We don't want to lose that information.
And it would still have to go through the personnel process
Yep.
for anything anyway, so. But
Adding
now that you're
employees.
here, that we have a TA here, there's a monitoring process through the.
I can't ever remember at a town meeting someone looking at a line item and challenging it. I mean, maybe they have, but
Well, yes, the next one area I would comment on is, so you're looking at coming down as like even salary line item combined with full-time item, because, I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, we are a small town, and I do like the salary line item, particularly for like the police, fire, and stuff like that, to be highlighted separate on the budget, because it does otherwise gets absorbed, and I know it does have, there are people that have strong feelings about the management costs.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing that it does get hidden, and it has come up at town meeting in the past.
Well, one thing I would recommend is doing a budget that's, and I have a different template that we can talk about for next year, but basically looking at a budget where you don't just have 3 pages, which we do right now. You actually would have a detail page that you could actually put in part of your budget report for each department that would break that down and provide that additional level of detail. So I would see the FinCom report perhaps growing from the summary sheet, the revenue sheet, and the expenditure sheet to having another backup page or 2 for each department that breaks things down a
Profit
little
and loss
further.
broken down by detail. So
Yep.
you get a high level, yeah.
Because you're right, I think people would have questions on the detail, but I think if you provide that information, but you still allow for the roll-up number to give you that flexibility, you're kind of solving both those problems together. So just something to think
And I
about.
think to Scott's point that if we switch to a different appearance, there'll be people who will question that. They'll go, okay, so like, why are we doing that? Like,
Yeah, well, there
and
are
that's not a
different
conversation you
questions.
want at the town meeting,
No.
But if it can
because
be
that could
put out
derail anything.
True.
Just bring
Yeah.
it back. Oh,
Yeah.
It's just a new
Well,
format.
I think in the interest of transparency,
How
if
many
you
town
can,
meetings have you attended?
if you're actually providing more detail in having a backup sheet for each department, then I think you have a justification for having a roll-up number.
Yeah.
So I think you would have to just add a little more detail to the budget itself, and that's more of a budget that I'm familiar working with. It takes a little more work on my end, but and the department head's end, but I think it's worth it in the end for the taxpayer to be able to see that breakout. And you could actually, typically you break it out by position even.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of look at it just like you're looking at any type of a public company, that's like the executive team's salary being clearly articulated out, and that's why one thing I'd worry about is that it would get lost in the mix.
And I think that's a valid point, so I think that's something we definitely would have to address as we go forward, if this is something we even want to consider, but just started to float it, it's early, you know?
Can I ask you another quick question?
Yeah.
Are we going to have any reserve fund transfers this week?
Not this week, I don't believe, no.
Okay.
So those are the 2 items I wanted to mention. The only other thing would be we are moving forward with getting the select board to start approving some of the budgets that do not contain supplemental funding requests. And we've done 2 rounds so far with the select board. That's gone well. And once we wrap up our presentations here, we'll start kind of looking to FinCom to take votes on those line items that the select board has now taken votes on. And that's all I have for you this evening.
All right, well, why don't we, after we've done with the schools, we can go back to talk about the hybrid at the end of our discussion here.
Sure.
All right, so we have Assabet up.
Fantastic. Good evening once again, our annual visit with the FinCom here in Berlin. As always, my name is Ernest Houle. I'm the Superintendent Director at Assabet. I have with me our Director of Business Operations, Maria Silva. It's actually her first time being at the meeting here in Berlin. So
Welcome.
Welcome.
I had to show the way. But as always, we thank you for your time and having us have the ability to present what our budget plan is for FY25. The one thing I'd like to say is that the school district appreciates the work of Lynn Ryan as our long-serving school committee member. She's, I believe, going in her 43rd year. I'm not sure she'd like it if I said that while she was here, but she started in '81. and is only the second school committee member that Berlin has seen for Assabet. So I just want to publicly acknowledge and thank her for her continued dedication and service. It's always a pleasure and the support from the Berlin community. We're celebrating 50 years this year of being in existence. So yeah, we've had some celebrations that have happened throughout the course of the years, and as you can imagine, and I didn't get names around the table, but what was your first name again?
Shane.
Shane had shared that he has a number of students working at the salon in Marlborough, Apex. So we've heard many stories of Assabet throughout the years. I was just in Hudson on Monday, and the new fire chief is a Assabet graduate.
Cool.
That was
Great.
just appointed. So, we hear the story, and Assabet's had the impact. Obviously, we're back when we were created, our 7-member communities made the determination that Assabet would be providing their vocational technical education for those communities. So to have the 16 programs we have, we feel lucky to be able to provide that to you. What I will tell you is this year in the FY25, we have the budget plan we're going to talk about today, and then we have an additional warrant article, which I had given Kristen a heads up about, and we can walk through that once we get through the budget. This budget plan is 37 total students is your enrollment, and we'll get into the enrollment figures and stuff on the slides, but I got a quick little fast facts. 37 as of October 1, 2023. It's all our enrollment and our Chapter 70 aides. That's actually currently, that's 35, that's this year. So what's not on here is the student profile that you have in front of you, just so I don't confuse people. It's only the high school secondary folks that are on that. You have 2 post-secondary folks
Okay.
that get into your calculation to get you to 37. Yep.
Okay.
Is that the
So
co-op?
I was going to do that last.
No, it's,
I
mean,
appreciate you keeping me on my
well,
toes.
I want to know whether to write something down. They
Yeah.
said, well, it's already written down. They said, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, that's perfectly fine, and we'll show you how that breaks out in the
Okay,
enrollment
thank you.
slide. So 7 less. This is the first class in which, for the freshman class that are in, that we have completely a total class of all in-district students. So we did not have any out-of-district students come in because of the large interest in coming to the school and the wait list. We have roughly just about 553 applications this year for coming into the FY25 school year for next September. 450 some odd were in-district students, and the remainder are out-of-district. So we usually only seat about 300, 305, So obviously all of our in-district kids get in, and then the folks on the wait list, basically if somebody decides not to accept, they come off the wait list, and we go through all of our in-district first. The one thing I can tell you is that the original assessment that we sent to Kristen as a placeholder actually decreased by $73,384. Originally, we had projected a $768,000, $312 assessment for Berlin, and it's coming in at $694,928. But that's just to give you a high level. If you just want to go to the next slide. And so you have the PowerPoint presentation, but as you know, we always bring a budget book to town meeting. And as soon as we get done working on that, it has a lot more flashier charts and line graphs in it that we don't have in this, but that's still being worked on as we get the budget process moving forward here. But what you'll see is, you can read it, we basically had 48 more in-district students over last year. The snapshot down below is basically it's an 8.5% increase over FY24. Which is an increase of $137,140. There's 2 grant positions that will be coming off of ESSER, and we have 3 additional positions that we're looking to add, which we'll talk about in the upcoming slides. We're in the final. We're going to be going into the final and 5th year of a school bus transportation contract. That's for FY25. So that increases at 2.8%. We will, at next year, begin the process of looking to go back out to bid. And if you've heard any of the local stories, it's been been not a great process for most districts that are looking to redo their transportation contracts. However, I will say, on the positive note, we are getting interest from out-of-state vendors, so it may not be just a monopoly within the state of Mass. So there is some hope. We do not have any healthcare information at this point, except for we have been told that the rates are coming in at about a 10% or higher. But our healthcare costs for the district, for folks that were hired prior to July 1, 2019, is a 75% for the district and 25% for the employee. And then anybody hired after that date, it's a 70-30 split. The last thing, as I mentioned, we're looking to establish a stabilization fund. We do have $250,000 allocated in this operational budget for capital improvement expenditures. And the reason for this coming before you this year is, as you'll see, as we have less ability to rely on out-of-district tuition, we need to start building in some stability for capital improvement and for the capital equipment for our technical programs. We also rely on grants, but grants and out-of-district tuition, neither one of those are sustainable features. So if you go into the next slide. So here's some of the things that will that have guided and tell the story of how our percentage went up. We've had that increase in students, as you can see. In some towns, as in Berlin, because I just mentioned that you guys went down 7 students, you'll see when we get to the minimum local contribution that as much as we think it's easy to just tie students and say, okay, take your figure divided by the number of students and that's what it is per pupil, the minimum local contribution, and I can show the example in Hudson, they lost like 12 students, but their minimum local contribution only went down $4,000. Right, so it's all based on your aggregate wealth model, and you know the routine there. Chapter 70 funding aid, you'll see $738,000, 35. The increase in minimum local contribution, that's what the town's requirement to pay is 1.153548, and then regional transportation rate last year, or this current year, in this budget, it was funded at 95%. And you can see we're back to the 80%. If Lynn was here, I'm sure she would tell you of the many, many years she has advocated, even from one standpoint of having magnets in the shape of buses that say don't cut regional transportation or fund it 100%, at the State House passing them out to legislators to get it at that 100%. It's never been as high as 95 like it is this year. That I can remember in my time in Career Tech Ed. So here's the total realized. The things on the bottom left are from last year, but they're just resources. They haven't been updated yet because obviously the House hasn't had their turn at the budget, and then the Senate, so we'll be updating those. Next slide, please. And again, if there's any questions, just feel free to stop.
Can I ask you first, just to clarify for
Sure.
people who are going to watch this, when you talk about our Berlin's minimum contribution, is that the one that's based on looking over the past 3 years when they do the calculation, or is that
No,
set
that's-
from early in?
Yeah, no, so we'll get in, we have a slide that will explain
Okay,
it.
good.
Yep. I think what you're thinking of is the debt service payment, which was when we did the renovation project. It was based on 3 years of average enrollment at the time in which the project was approved, and that percentage will stay for the life of the debt service payment. So we're going to get into that.
Okay,
We have
good.
that slide. Yep. So there's our topics for today that we're going to look at. You can read that, and then we'll just, next slide is fine. So these are our budget drivers. They didn't really change much from last year. The only couple things that we did add, we have an increasing number of multilingual language students. That's the new term from DESE, if you haven't heard. It was English language learners and English learners, now it's multilingual learners. So MLL, if you see that throughout the slides. Our students with disabilities, we're seeing a smaller number of students receiving special ed services, but they're coming to us with higher needs. When I started in 2015, we had about a 35% population of students requiring special ed services. We're down to about 25% right now. So less students requiring special ed services, but greater needs of the students that we're meeting. We're still dealing with SEL, social emotional learning, mental health situations, as most districts are. We are a full inclusion school, so when we talk about special education, most of our classes are co-taught classes, so you would have a special education teacher as well as a core academic teacher in that class, because we do not have resource rooms and things of that nature. And we find that that model works because when it comes to our accountability rating, this year we received needs little or no intervention, and our MCAS scores have been on the climb. So let's see.
When was the 35%? That's going back how many years? That we kind of.
So that was 2015 when I started. Was 35. Yep.
Okay, so since.
So we're down to about 25%, and it does fluctuate because obviously the purpose of special education is when you have a student that's on it, right? If you're providing them the services, the plan is to move them off of special education services by the time they graduate. So sometimes some of that is us getting the students to go ahead and move off special ed services, so we're decreasing those numbers. But some of them are, and we have a minimum criteria lottery, so that's something else we can kind of get into a little bit later, but that's basically if somebody meets some of the criteria to apply, then they have a 50-50 shot of getting in. So that could have impact on that percentage number, but that's only been within the last 3 years. So it really wouldn't tell the story prior to that. So, and then the last couple things we have is this does meet all contractual obligations. Our COLA for our teachers, it's the final year of a contract, 3-year contract is 3.25%. We did inflationary costs. It's interesting. It seems some things have leveled out, but some of the consumables, especially for our technical programs, are going up. I just recently got an email, which I shared with Maria, I think it was yesterday, that drywall is going up 20%. So if you're in the business that you use drywall, the manufacturers have told us it's going up 20%. So all kinds of information you're getting tonight from us, right? And then lastly, the capital improvement funds, as I mentioned, would be something that we're looking at because of reducing our reliance on out-of-district tuition and the grants. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the 3 staffing adjustments. We have a paraprofessional in special education we're looking to add, an athletic trainer, and an electives instructor. The electives instructor could be a phys ed or a health teacher, or an art teacher. We're going to determine exactly what that will be based on the program of studies, what students pick. We did at one time have 4 phys ed teachers. 2 of them taught phys ed and health, and 2 taught phys ed. And then when COVID hit, basically got decimated. We've been down to 1. We had a second one that joined us this current year, and then we're trying to get back to pre-COVID levels. So, and the athletic trainer, I'm not sure if folks have ever tried to get one on a part-time basis, but it's almost impossible to get you can get an EMT. You can get somebody potentially from the fire department that's not, that wants to work on the side, but the issue is they basically can assess, and then they either tell them to sit on the sidelines or they put them in an ambulance where an athletic trainer can tape and, get them back to getting on the field. So, all right, next slide. You want to jump in? Or you want to keep going? Okay. So here's the enrollment changes for the district. You'll see our 7-member communities in blue at the top. You'll notice in the far left, grade 9, Boylston, Clinton, Shrewsbury, other, it's all 0. Like I mentioned, it's the first time we've had a class of all in-district students. Fun fact, when I started, we didn't get enough applications from in-district folks to even fill the freshman class. 5 applications, 175, and we would take 275. And then we increased it to 300. And then through some rebranding, marketing, and refocusing our efforts, we've been able to help with the interests of Assabet. So you'll see the second one, Berlin, the first one. There's your breakdown by grades. You have 37 total. The PS is post-secondary. So those are the 2 folks, and they're either in an LPN program and or a cosmetology program. And so you'll see the difference of 44 from October 1, 2022 to October 1 of 2023. That's how we look at those numbers. Okay. Next slide. We use the statutory method of assessment, which is in our regional agreement. So basically, that's the breakdown of how the method is calculated. You can go right to the next slide. I'll let you read that. Here's what is MLC, minimum local contribution. It's basically your local ability to pay. It's based on a number of factors: 50% property wealth, 50% local income wealth, known as the aggregate wealth model, and then you see what the percentages of foundation budget and what it would mean to fund a minimum through state aid and even the wealthiest communities. So just a kind of definition for folks that are unfamiliar with the term. Next slide. Again, governor's budget was released on January 25th. That was a hyperlink, right? That used to work. I don't know what happened to that, but we'll look to, does it still work?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good.
Just wants to yell at me.
Usually lights up in blue. Again, just a resource slide. Next slide. We have it broken down for you. So here's the minimum local contribution, and this is Assabet Valley. Every school district has this, so you can look at the state as a total. As you went and clicked on that link, basically we generally look at the far right and look at the comparison FY24. So you can see the change in the students at the top. The enrollment is up 48 students. So it's 1,019 in district. You can see the foundation budget number, the required district contribution, what the Chapter 78 is. That went up, as I mentioned, $738,035. And then the required net school spending, that number, $23,323,393, is what we're required to spend at the 100% minimum threshold, and of course you can be above that. There are additional things that we'll talk about that include above minimum assessment, which are also required, but we generally run between the 2 to 3% above net school spending, where many other school districts in our surrounding communities are anywhere between 27% to 35%. So, next slide. So here's the net school spending. They haven't updated this, so as you can see, if the top in yellow are our 7-member communities, the bottom blue, the very top is Assabet, and then other like-sized vocational schools. For the past couple of years, we were actually below net school spending. Part of that, if you remember the whole ordeal with ESSER, right, and they told us we were able to give it back to you a certain amount, and then they actually Berlin was one community that did not take it because I think it was only about $15,000. But we had we had to return some funds last year because they were cataloged in the wrong year, so we were above net school E&D rather, and had to return it. So whenever you don't meet net school spending, as you can see in FY22 on that slide, you then have to make it up in the next year, what the deficit is. So whatever your 100% spending was in FY23, you have to then overspend it by $473,934 in order to make yourself become whole, right, for FY24. So you can escape maybe 1 year, but then there maybe 2, but they generally catch you, and then you got to end up spending more than what you've budgeted, which is interesting to do. So, but you'll see Berlin, Boylston, actual required percent of what they're required is 155%, right? And they spend 168% above of net school spending. So they're about 13% above, based on that FY22 number that I'm looking at. So just a comparison to kind of look at. So next slide. That's again just a reference resource. So here's the minimum local contribution tab. You can see the breakdown by community. It shows you FY24, Berlin at the top had 44 students. This year 37. You see the reduction, the change is -7. 678, 363 was last year's, and you had a reduction in your minimum local contribution requirement of $80,577. So that's one thing that benefits or was part of that $73,384 difference that we talked about. Next slide. So here's, I guess this is the money page, right, we'll call it. This is the, if you look at this breaks down our complete assessment for what is required for our 7-member communities. The very top is the minimum local contribution number that we just looked at, 597,786 for Berlin. If you look just at the very bottom, go down to the percentage, based on your enrollment and how it's decreased, right, with the 7 students, the operational share for Berlin for the budget is 3.6% for this year. Okay? So that's how all your calculations in yellow are going to be determined. So that's the above minimum assessment required. So for busing, as it says there, net busing, we get a regional transportation reimbursement, which I mentioned, right, which was $760,000 and some change. So that pays a portion of busing, but then the remainder of that is if you look to the far right in that top yellow column there, on the total, the $583,296, that's the difference of the busing of our contract that we owe, and that's what gets distributed amongst our 7-member towns. So Berlin's share of that is the $21,180 in that first column. The OPEB trust, we did a slight increase to that. If you remember, for a number of years, the folks that have been on, we only were allocating $35,000 towards OPEB. Obviously, I don't know if anybody's ever going to meet the OPEB, meet that requirement. But at $35,000, we especially were not. Last year we did $50,000. This year we bumped it up to $25,000 more. So it's at $75,000. So Berlin's share of that is $2,723. And then the last piece is that capital improvement fund, which you see to the far right, the total of $250,000. Berlin's share of that is the $9,078. And I'm going to talk more about that capital improvement fund in another slide. So we won't go any further into that. But the long-term debt service, I have a couple slides after that will explain that $64,162. But if you look to the far right, the $1,757,875 is the total due. 1.1 million of that is principal, and the remainder, $657,875, is the interest. And the one thing I will note is that, if you recall, last year we had, and it's in the next slides, I'm jumping ahead in my mind, there was $27 million that the bond was set at for this debt service schedule, but the district actually had $29 million, an extra $2 million that needed to be paid for. The district picked that up and did a ban. Well, luckily this past December, the district paid that ban off. So that's no longer part of any, and it wasn't technically part of the assessment because the district picked it up. So that's off the books. So the total assessment is $694,928 that we'll be looking to go to town meeting with. And then you'll see the school enrollment right below that, 35 in the secondary or the 9 through 12 grades, and then 2 in post-secondary for your 37. And again, as I mentioned, the 3.6 operational share. So, yes.
I may be getting ahead of myself.
Yeah.
But the $9,078 that is in the capital improvement fund, that's the new fund that you're setting up. Okay. So typically when we set up the budget for Assabet, we have 2 line items. That's just the way we do our budget. We do the assessment and then we do the long-term debt. So I'm curious as to how the other communities are handling that new capital fund.
Yep. So what we're planning on doing, so regardless of the stabilization fund, we're looking to establish it.
Yep. Okay.
That's one component, right? So that'll be the separate warrant article. And you folks usually break apart your operational to the debt assessment, right?
Correct.
Where Hudson, they do it all in one, right? So they'll have two articles for Assabet this year. You folks will have 3. You'll have your regular operational, you'll have your long-term debt assessment, and then the stabilization fund article is something totally separate. So the capital improvement fund piece, we put it into the operational budget because we need to have it as a new standard that becomes part of our operational budget. So regardless if the stabilization fund for some reason gets voted down, it's still in the operational budget, and the only difference is, like you folks have a stabilization fund. For Berlin, all of our 7-member communities do. And so the beauty with the stabilization fund is, and I'll talk about it at Dan Moore, is those funds can grow and can basically move from year to year, right? You got to still report them and do all that stuff, but they can grow. So you may not use it every year. If for some reason the stabilization fund doesn't get approved, we would then use that 250 and allocate it per year for capital improvements. So as much as I'd like to say the renovation project was fantastic and it was a blessing for the towns to do it, unfortunately, it only did all of the exterior of the building, the windows, the roofs, the doors. It put in a sprinkler system. It changed all of our HVAC and heating, air conditioning, but it didn't do anything to address the 50-year-old tile floors that potentially have mastic in them from, that was keeping the tiles down. And now at 50 years, they're all starting to pop up, just like old wallpaper that starts to peel from the wall. And so the problem with that is not having the ability without a district tuition or going back to MSBA to look for them to do that. We need to create some other type of mechanism to handle those things. Obviously, we can't do the entire building at once, right? It's going to have to be done in sections. It'll have to be scheduled. But the problem with that 50-year-old floor is that if there's asbestos in the mastic, it's got to be abated. And of course, the abatement is probably 3 times as much as the cost of the floor.
Asbestos, yeah, during construction.
So that's the challenge, right? And it's everybody, you're trying to stretch your money as best you can. The nice thing is, like I said, and I'll talk about it in the stabilization slide, though, for capital improvement, we've been pretty lucky about getting grants. But again, you never know how long grants are going to last. So and the renovation project was the first real capital project that any of our member towns have had to financially support, except for the operational of the school, in 40 years. And now we're, after the project's been done, 3 years, 4 years, the additional years for that, right? We've been able to still handle things through what we have for funds. And you'll see even this budget, we support it with some out-of-district funds still, as we're weaning that down over the years as it becomes a smaller number. So any other questions on this slide? Or okay, next slide. So here's the capital debt assessment. Sure you don't want to jump in? Okay.
If you need.
I get on a roll, right? Capital debt assessment, as I mentioned, FY25, it's the 9th year of this payment process, and as I mentioned, 1.1 in interest, the remainder in, 1.1 in principal and the remainder in interest, and it's based on that 3-year enrollment average that I talked about. If you want to go to the next slide, it will explain it a little bit better. So here's the capital debt assessment. So at the time when the project was approved, Berlin had a 3-year average of 3.65% of the operational budget or enrollment of the school district at that time. So these percentages for all of our communities will remain for the entire debt service schedule, which is through 2042. Those won't change, regardless if you have 30 students come in, or regardless if you get on 10 students. It's going to remain at that 3.65 for the debt service payment. So you'll see it reduced by $2,008, which is generally about a $55,000 reduction every year. If you go to the next slide, Kristen.
Sure.
Yeah, there's the debt service schedule payment from 2016 through 2042, and again highlighted as year 9. And you'll see basically, so at least from that part, you can do some planning to know when you're going to be completely done.
I like that.
So that's one nice thing. I think it was actually, at the time, it was before me. They were brilliant in, I think, holding that percentage of what you'd be required, because as we all know, things fluctuate, and it could have been a lot more expensive if they hadn't done it with a fixed rate. So next slide. So here's our operational revenue plan. I'm missing a slide here. I'm going to have to look at that one, I guess. The operational revenue plan. So basically, this is just an all-in-one snapshot of all the slides we just looked at. If you see at the very top, you'll see Chapter 70 state aid. In the left-hand column, it's 24. In the middle projected revenue column, that's 25. And we just basically, those numbers that we've already shared with you get plugged into this chart. So you'll see all the minimum local contribution numbers at the top. You move down to the ASMA district. So what we're doing is we initially, for FY24, we had allocated $500,000 from E&D this year. we're certified with E&D, about 880,000, I think it was, some change. We're earmarking 450 of that.
Sorry, Ernie, E&D is, remind me.
Excess and deficiency.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
so a school district can
Yep.
retain up to 5% of the overall budget to be used to help offset and use as revenue towards the next year's budget. But you can't exceed that 5%, or you then have to get into a situation of turning it back to towns. So we always try and stay below that.
We're here, you know, if you need to.
I know. No one's ever told us to keep it. Interest income. Oh,
Year before last?
what's that?
We did recently just get,
That was last year.
It was last year, okay,
Yeah.
I remember that. Because I
It
remember
seems
looking
so
this
far
year
away.
going, are we getting money? And then I went, oh no, it's below 5%.
That was, unfortunately, it was actually before Maria's time. It was something that she ended up having to clean up that, kind of had gone unnoticed prior to her coming in, so. The interest income, we're upping that by 50,000 from last year, 150,000. And then Medicaid reimbursement, that really is based on the students that we're servicing. So there's a determination made at the beginning of each year as to which kids, based on their services, actually may be able to help the district and gain some reimbursement through Medicaid. So that's, again, not a sustainable number there, but it's an anticipated that Maria's been pretty good at, even with this budget and last year's budget. Last year's budget, I think you budgeted 10%, and the governor's numbers came in at 9.6. This year, I want to say it was even closer than that, right? It was a 0.1%, or 2% of what she predicted. So I think looking at the Medicaid reimbursement, she's comfortable with the $75,000 that we put. So that's the $675,000, that aspect for the revenue plan. And then the state reimbursement, there's the regional school transportation. And then the member community assessments, right? Those are the ones that get added to your minimum local contribution at the top to help. And in the way we do it, we show it now in that colorful slide, right? They make up your total assessment, including the debt assessment. I know you folks break it out with the debt assessment, but the total assessment was on that colorful slide, which was the $694,928, right? So the total budget, again, at the bottom, like you said, 8.5% overall, $27,425,514. Next slide. So as I mentioned, as we continue to see our out-of-district students' enrollment diminish, we currently have, we will have a smattering of out-of-district students that will most likely enroll or have a higher probability of enrolling in the sophomore, junior years. I highly doubt they'll end up getting in the freshman year, just because there's too many students applying. They may get into the sophomore and junior years, but even at that component, they don't have the flexibility of having a robust exploratory. They would only be able to get into programs that had openings. So there are a lot of variables that can control whether the student gets in. Now, have there been students that say, I don't care what I have to take, I'll just, whatever I need to do to get into ASABIT, I'll do it. That has happened, and sometimes it works out, and sometimes they're there for a few months, and then it's like, no, this is not for me, this is not what I really wanted. Or they have an expectation that they'll go in for half a year, and then something will open up, or even the next year that they can transfer. And it doesn't usually happen like that. And then we don't generally take anybody over past junior year because the requirements, the regulations require a 2 years of enrollment to get certified in their career field. So unless the student's transferring from another vocational school in the same program, we wouldn't bring them in as a senior. So the out-of-district tuition that you can see, so last year we used $2 million towards the health insurance and $500,000 towards electricity for the 2.5. We've reduced that by $800,000 this year, but we're still allocating $1.5 million of out-of-district tuition towards health insurance and $200,000 in electricity. I believe I had a bit of a stumbling block explaining that last year, so hopefully it's clearer this year. So if you go to the next slide, Kristen. this might help, with it too, so your expenditures by function. So you can see, obviously, and I believe it was actually Scott that asked me, like, how can your insurance for all of those employees and retirees be so low? And of course, at the time, I was like, a little bit tongue-tied because you caught me off guard, but that's because we're supplementing it with the 1.5 million. Eventually, that 1.7 million is going to end up rolling into the budget over the next couple of years. So we basically see the trend of the increase of in-district students probably happening through 27. So 2 more, we're going to go through 25 next year, 26, and then 27 is where we think it may end up leveling off, where you don't see these larger increases of percentages of the budget. All that's really happening is the cost sharing is moving from the out-of-district towns to the member towns that have the enrollment, right, of the students. And the other piece, too, that I would say, and I'll get back to this, is that, when you look at your percentages, right, and you look at it, and if we were to go back and look at the enrollment slide for Marlboro, of course, they've got 53% of the students at Assabet. So they can have 47, I forget, what was there, 41? They had 41 students this year, I think.
Increase?
Yeah. If you can just look for me. But they have this huge increase of students,
No, it's 11%.
and yet, what was it?
It's like 11%.
55. That's on-
55
yeah,
students,
55,
and they only went up 11%, right? And yet you folks dropped 7 students and went down 15%. So, so it's based on the number of students right that are there, so that affects their percentage. So, obviously, and then if you look at it and you say, okay, if we were to look at what the cost per pupil is based on what their assessment is, their cost per pupil looks much smaller because of the amount of kids they have, right? So, so if you can just go to the next slide for me.
So the out-of-district is Boylston, Clinton, Shrewsbury, and how many other, what's other? How many
So
towns
we
is that?
service this, there's 7 member communities,
Yeah.
and we service about 13 others.
13 others?
And some of them may be singletons from, we had a student that lived in Marlboro that then moved to Leominster, that's a senior, that wants to finish their senior year. That superintendent will sign off.
Got
It
it.
gets complicated because transportation's not included. We no longer are responsible for transporting the student.
Yep.
Leominster would be responsible for the student. A lot of times the parent will just say, I'll just drive them. A lot of times the school district will just reimburse the parent for bringing the student. If not, they've got to set up a van to get the student there.
Okay.
I've heard some pretty creative ways, especially with the busing issues that we've been dealing with, that we're even talking about Ubers for kids to get. A lot of times the parent may live in the vicinity, so if they're going to work anyway, they just drop the
Yeah,
student
drop
off.
the- yeah.
So,
Cool.
Can I go back one slide just for
Sure.
a moment?
Yes.
So one thing that threw me for a loop on this last year is that I didn't have a sense of what the revenue was on out-of-district tuition. So, and I'm assuming anything above and beyond the 1.7 that's going into the budget would flow into that excess and deficiency that no, okay. Please.
No, what usually, you want me to do it? Or? What usually happens is, so out-of-district tuition money ends up, it's in a revolving account.
It's a revolving,
similar to the
okay.
stabilization fund.
Okay.
In only regional vocational schools or regional schools that have out-of-district students, it's just like the choice money that potentially Berlin Boylston
okay.
can use.
Okay, got it.
Right, so that's, so the interesting thing is when you look at the budget, and I actually never really thought about it until Maria joined Assabet, but when you think about the total budget, right, there's a lot of, when I mentioned we have grants that we access, right, towards equipment and things of that nature, they're not in the operational budget, right? They're above and beyond, so there are additional things, additional revenues that we don't know are guaranteed, so we don't put them in because it's a competitive grant process, for example, for workforce skills grant, right? Assabet's been very fortunate that they came out when Deval Patrick was governor his last year. They were carried through with Governor Baker, and then they've been a little stalled for the past year, but hopefully will continue with Governor Healy. But we've been pretty fortunate that we've earned probably close to $6.5 million for the purchase of equipment for our programs, right? Part of that caveat, though, is when you get the grant money, they're expecting our school to be open from 7 in the morning until 10 at night, because they want that equipment to be used not only for the high school kids, but if you do any afternoon programs, and then if you do any workforce development programs for adults that are unemployed or underemployed, or looking to get a career change that can potentially get them in with a livable wage. They've also created these programs called CTI initiatives, which is Career Technical Initiative, and that's specifically for workforce development. And usually what that is for is that's to actually pay for the adults to take the night programs that qualify. And or, I will say, they've recently added that if there's a high school student that didn't have the ability to get into the tech school for their high school diploma and their high school education, they will grant them award, and it's $8,000. They will pay for them to go through a 200 to 400 hour course or program, which could be welding, it could be HVAC, it could be plumbing, it could be automotive, it could be advanced manufacturing. So they are understanding that there is a lack of seats for career tech ed students getting into the schools. Right now there's a huge range, but it's like between 6,000 and 11 students that each year apply that don't get in. I say the number is vast because there are students that will apply. There may be students that apply to Assabet, but they also apply to Essex Tech, the agricultural school, and they might apply to Norfolk Aggie, and they might apply to Smith Volk if they really want an ag school, but they apply to us too, because if they don't get into one of those, well then I'm in this member town, so hopefully I'll get into here. Or they're at least getting a 25% chance to get in one of those instead of just a 50.
like
Right? So what happens is they apply to us, and then they meet the criteria, they're not picked initially, we put them on the wait list. Right? We don't know if the other schools have them on their wait list too. So that's something the Department of Ed has to look at to see how they figure out how to not duplicate students that are on multiple wait lists. So did that
It did.
clarify
thank
the
you.
out of district? Okay. So really on this, the expenditures by function, you'll see the larger areas is instruction. That's in really the consumable. Our academic side of the house, they tend to send money back. Not a lot, but obviously the need to buy textbooks is a lot less with technology, but it's the software that kind of gets us. Really the instruction is the consumables or our technical programs. We do seek donations from any industries that we talk to or meet with. Whenever I meet somebody from a new industry, I'm like, hey, any interest in joining our program advisory? And if you ever have scrap metal or scrap whatever that you're looking to get rid of, or old equipment that can be used, we do that. It's also the 3 positions that we're hiring in there, and it's also, like I mentioned, the COLA, cost of living adjustment, the 3.25%. It also includes steps and levels. So, if you're not at the top step on the salary scale, each year you move down a step, plus there's a built-in increase in there besides the COLA. And to move over a level would be whether or not you have advanced education or credits to be able to move from one column to the next. The other one is in the operation and maintenance. You'll see there's a large jump there, and that is for some facility stuff. It includes a telephone system in which I'm sure you've heard that all the telephone systems in government buildings are supposed to have the ability that when you call, 911 should be able to tell exactly which room you're calling from and the site and all that stuff. Well, we have a hybrid phone system, which is part analog and part. So literally our folks, if they call 911 from a classroom or a shop, they have to tell them the location of where they are. It doesn't show up on the screen. So we've got a number of years to fix that.
Wow.
And then it could potentially affect funding. So again, it's, something we're dealing with. The nice thing is everybody has cell phones now, so potentially somebody could do that, but it also doesn't help when most of our systems you have to dial 9 to get out.
Yep.
And then if you hit, so we have a lot of people that accidentally hit 911 and don't realize it. They forgot they hit the 9, then they hit the 9, and then the 1 and the 1 to call someplace else, and all of a sudden they're getting 911. So new systems like that will, hopefully voice over IP, which would give a lot more flexibility, I think, to the system. So that's what those larger increases there. So those are really the only two line items that are larger. The short and long-term debt has decreased, as I mentioned. But other than that, it's pretty clear. Any questions on this slide? Either I'm being very thorough or I've stumped you tonight.
It
You
makes
always,
sense.
you always.
Well, when you were talking about do you have good cell phone service at Assabet?
It depends which window you're standing next to, because we are pretty much a concrete bunker. If there's any kind of hurricane or tsunami type things, that's the place to go, because it's all poured in place concrete. So yeah, we don't really have. We actually had to get repeaters for our radio system because there were parts of the building that we weren't getting any service. And of course, no one realizes how much expensive those are too. And that happened actually when the building renovation project finished. We had to deal with that. So yeah, it's not that easy unless you're near an outside window or.
So the cell phone is not as reliable as.
No.
We have the Wi-Fi hooked up into it.
Yeah, we do have Wi-Fi. So if you can call over Wi-Fi, call over Wi-Fi works. We have times though, depending upon. Some of the lines coming into the building, if it's a really wet day, you get the phone's crackles and crinkles, and it literally, some days we have a 30-second delay to get a phone, to get it to go out. It's just silent, and then, right, so it is so the nice thing is we do have an SRO on site, so if we have anything, it's usually 911 that we need an ambulance. Call gets to the principal, he connects with the SRO, and he calls it over his radio. So they're there in a heartbeat. So that concludes the FY25 budget portion. So I don't know if you have any specific questions before we get into the stabilization. But actually, before we do that, let's look at, if you want to look at this slide real quick. I don't have the slide on the screen, but I gave you a handout because they were still completing these. So when we have our budget book, what we used to do is we used to produce a budget book for each town. So there would be this one page in it. And then we said to ourselves, why don't we just put all 7, so that way all communities can see what each of them are doing, right? And we don't have to keep track of the books. So that what will come out at town meeting. But yours, as you can see, has the 35 students. Again, it's grades 9 through 12 in the top left. So there's 35 students total that you have. 14 of them are receiving special ed services. There are 2 currently out on co-op. Again, this is as of October 2nd, so we'll be up. These get updated. And 9 economically disadvantaged. You'll see the shop choices basically if you look where your folks are spread. And it looks like the top shop is HVAC, is where you have 5. And then you got 4 in auto collision. And it looks like you get a tie for 3rd between electrical wiring and business technology. So that's the breakdown of where your 35 students are. And then again, in the post-secondary, they're either in LPN or cosmetology. The bottom right area, MCAS averages for all of those, for the students. Again, that would be based on the prior year's MCAS, which they're taking. It could be folks that have taken it for the first time, or it could also include a number of folks that have taken it maybe multiple times but then passed. And then the bottom left is the postgraduate plans for 2023. You had 13 graduates last year. Looks like 3 went into post-secondary education and 10 went into work. So they went right into the workforce. Yeah. A lot of times we'll see it's 50-50, or they go into military. The nice thing is for Voc schools, we generally have to follow up 1 year and then 3 years after. And sometimes we even try and do 5 years. But to try and get them to respond, number one, we got to figure out what technology they're on. because they're not on email anymore. And
TikTok.
I just said that.
Yeah, right,
Snapchat.
TikTok. We generally will put it on our website or give multiple variables to get them on it, but it doesn't always work. So it's not always solid numbers. Usually 1 year after we still get them, but after that it can be dicey. So any other questions on the operational budget? Okay. So the stabilization fund is really no different than what it is for the municipalities, right? And as I mentioned, I think all 7 municipalities, I've got a little chart here that I pulled. And of course, it only gives the figures from 2022, but it has all the stabilization funds for all of our surrounding towns. So all 7 of our communities have one. The section 16G.5 of Chapter 71 from Mass General Law is the law that governs stabilization funds for regional school districts, because obviously, we're not technically part of your municipality from the standpoint of, how the operation of the town works or the city, so we cannot access any of that stabilization fund. Let's say we never did a stabilization fund and we didn't put any capital improvement money into the budget. Should we have some type of situation happen at Assabet, what would end up happening that would require that it be it's not like we decided to redo the auditorium and said, hey, we're gonna you guys need to pay for this. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about more of a safety, life and safety type issue that all of a sudden we didn't have the ability to fund. We would end up having to come back most likely through a special election, and the towns would be responsible to bear that burden. Right, and it would be split based on your enrollment, exactly how we have the budget, and that's what we're basically trying to avoid. Right, we're trying to be proactive, preemptive in our strategic planning here. So, Mass General Law, that regional school, and there's a link. So if Kristen forwards you the PowerPoint afterwards, you can click on that link and read about it. And basically, there is guidance as to how the fund can be used, right? And then we provided you with what DESI's advisory is of that established fund. So the nice thing is the school committee, I think, realized that, based on the timing, where we are without a district, how our district is moving, that on January 9th, they voted to push forward to our 7 communities this warrant article, which the language is right there below. And it's the establishment of stabilization fund by Assabet Valley Regional Vocational Technical. And you can see the wording there that's pursuant to Mass General Law 16G.5, Chapter 71, to be invested in to retain its own interest earnings as provided by law, and further set up an operational line item to be created to transfer monies into said stabilization fund or to take any other action relative thereto. And because it may not be financial, some districts don't tie any money to this the first go around. But because it is financial in nature, it does still require a 2/3 vote of our communities, as if it was a financial decision, because it is long term. I had something else I was going to tell
So you need 2/3 of the 7 towns?
Yeah, so 5
Okay.
out of our 7 communities
Okay.
have to vote, just like our budget.
Okay.
5 out of 7 have to vote to approve.
Okay.
And if for some reason only 4 approve and the others say no, then it goes nowhere.
So the question for Kristen, so when we vote at town meeting, we also need from the number of attendees at town meeting a 2/3 vote on this one, or a 50-50?
I don't know. It requires a 2/3 vote of member communities.
Right.
Towns,
So I-
so 5 out of
Yeah,
7.
but at
Right.
town meeting, we also have.
Yeah, but at town meeting, there's sometimes,
Sometimes it
this
usually.
might be something that requires a 2/3 vote.
Typically.
But I don't know for sure.
I don't know either, that's why I'm
What
asking.
do you require for the budget?
It's just a simple
Majority.
majority. I think this is a simple majority because
I think
unless
so,
it's
too, but-
zoning
Yeah, if
or
it
you're
is
taking
zoning,
money out of
2/3.
stabilization, which typically requires a higher vote, then
Okay.
usually it's. But I've put it in the warrant, and town council will go through it and we'll make sure everything's
So,
clear.
you know, we didn't make this language up. Obviously, we checked with legal counsel for the
Yeah.
district, and this is what they actually provided us 2 options. The other one was very vanilla, and I thought there would be a lot of questions. So basically, with this, seeing that the school committee is the governing body for the district, they would have oversight as to the usage of the stabilization fund. The requirement, though, if you look at Desi's advisory, the requirement of their governance is that when we come to do this budget presentation to you next year, if it was enacted and we had money in there, and we decided not to use it, we would report to you what the fund is and what the level is at. And then if we had any plans, just like you do for the fire department and allocating a fire truck, we would be saying to you that the district has allocated X amount of dollars for the purchase of a computer numeric controlled plasma cutting table for the metal fab shop for $40,000. And the reason I tell you that is because we actually just got some extra Perkins money, and we're purchasing a plasma cutter for $40,000. So, so when we talk about capital improvement, it's not a $5,000. You know, it's a lifespan of $10,000 or more. 10 years or more, and it's usually something that's over $10,000 in nature. So the committee would vote and control that, and then we would report it out every time we came before you with the budget.
You answered half the question about what I was thinking of was exactly who controlled it.
Right.
And just like the, is it similar to like for our stabilization fund, when we do want to take money out, the town requires 2/3 vote to get money out. Does that require 2/3 vote of the school committee to get money out? Is it a simple 4-3, or will it require a 5-2?
Yeah, I think generally, even for all of our financial stuff, it's generally a simple vote, even with the financial stuff, like with the budget. But we can, I'll clarify that for you just to make sure, and we'll get back to you.
Because that's one, would
I'll
be
get
one
back to
difference
Kristen and
there
she
is between like a town stabilization.
Yeah, I think they're very, very similar.
Stabilization, or can it just be a general? Can you do just a generalized stabilization, or would you set it up as a capital?
Yeah, so the wording that you see is, even in the law, it just calls it a stabilization fund. So it's a generic. We're establishing it because we're looking at it for capital improvement. So anything that you see within a line item in the budget will say capital improvement fund. And that's what's going to get earmarked to the stabilization.
Could it
But from the-
theoretically be used for other purposes, though, in case, if there was an emergency, or?
Again, I would say, for me, in my experience of my prior district that had it, it was only for large capital improvements. If you had, and I'll give you a prime example. This is actually a good example because it was not created at the time. In my former district, which was Minuteman, they had a new fire chief come in. This was in their old building. They had a new fire chief come in, and they had a section of the building was called the trades hall. So you'd leave a part of the building, and then all of a sudden there was this giant build area that had all your traditional trades: carpentry, electrical, plumbing, welding, right, and all that stuff. And in the concept of the 70s, which was an open concept, all of those shops originally only had a yellow painted line that separated them. And so they were completely wide open. Now, if you can imagine safety issues, you have electricians throwing wing nuts or wire nuts at the carpenters or at our kitty corner. So eventually what happened is they put up fence, and then it became walls, right? And of course in the 70s, safety was not paramount, and they had a long-term fire chief that would say, just use fire-rated paint, it'll be perfectly fine on the wood walls. Well, the new chief came in, took a tour, and said, unless you have the power cut to this by Monday, I'm shutting this down because you can't operate this section of the building. So at the time, they were going through a building project to build a new one. They were allocated $738,000 for a feasibility study. They hadn't been approved for that yet, because I'm getting ahead of myself. So because they hadn't been approved for that, they had to go to the towns. They got special dispensation from procurement to basically bypass all the procurement laws to get it fixed, and it was $453,000 that got borne on the backs of the communities that they had to send an invoice for because it was a safety issue. So what I see is larger equipment type things, and then infrastructure repairs to the building, roadways, parking lots, things of that nature. Nothing, I don't think, although I think there has been in the past, like if they needed a new truck or gym floor. Yeah,
We had it in my former district as well.
you
I was
can
at
share your
Greater
experience.
Lawrence for 20 years. Graduated there. Lived there for 20 more years after that. But yeah, we established, so we would have a capital improvement committee, like within the district. It would have 2 district committee members. It would have superintendent, myself, the principal, and somebody from Career Tech and maintenance. And what we established it for is like renovation of the gym floor, or if we needed a new scoreboard for the football field, or like big projects like that. And the stabilization fund is just one source of funding. It doesn't always cover all of it, but then you have you track it for what you need in the future years, so you can determine how much you need to kind of put in it kind of slowly and build it so that you can purchase that or repair the gym floor or the bleachers. So it's kind of just really big projects. In the vocational areas, it would be like capital equipment. Anything above 25,000 would be brought to the capital improvement committee. And then when we decide in the committee, that's chaired by whoever decides to chair it. And then we would bring it to school committee, and they would, we would present what we wanted to use it for. A motion will be taken, just like any financial or any other motion be taken, and then that's the way it was approved. So it was just a simple motion, like a motion
Simple
like any,
majority.
and there was a simple majority with the motion.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the Mass General Law for this section,
Sure.
which is, somebody asked that question, what is it? So what it says is the stabilization fund may be appropriated by a vote of 2/3 of all the members of the regional district school committee for any purpose for which regional school districts may borrow money, or for such other district purpose as the Commissioner of Elementary and Secondary Education may approve, right? So it does sound like they're really pointing it at capital, and they want 2/3 of the school committee to be behind it. That's what the
Yep.
MGL says, so
Sure.
I assume that would apply to what we've got going here.
Yes.
Well, and
Yep.
that's my question, and not to be the pain in the butt, but we had, in my former community, once a general stabilization account that literally was raided one year because it wasn't specifically allocated for certain uses. So in lieu of doing an override, those funds were grabbed, and it's still a bone of contention to this day.
Yeah,
You want to
So-
designate, but it says pursuant to that section, and that section, I
Right.
think, puts the...
It's specific. Yep.
Right, I
It's
guess.
the framework. Yep.
And maybe this
Framework,
is a
yeah.
question too for the school committee as well. I see a member over there.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
Apologies.
Nice to see you.
No problem. I mean, and you can also, even if there is more of a general purpose to it, it's up to the school committee because it's under their purview. So if the school committee is making a commitment to use these funds for capital, if you have that institutional knowledge and that commitment on the books, and that's how it's intended to be used going forward, sometimes even if there is a bit of flexibility, that's the important part, is that that's the intent and that it's continued forward.
And you'll see the money going in because it'll be part of the budget. It'll be a budget line item going in.
Yep.
One of the things I hope they have a chance to do is to do the driveway and parking. I don't know if you've been over there, but years and years and years. And there's no way that in 1 year we could add something that's probably, well, I'm not good at construction, but it's
over
going to
$1
cost
million.
It's
a
one
couple
point
of
one.
$1 million.
Yeah,
to
1.8.
fix.
Million?
You
That's
know,
the last one we got.
There, I'm not a bad guesser, am I?
No.
But we couldn't come in a given year. It's not an emergency, okay, just like potholes aren't out there now. But you would have a chance as the money is accumulating. It would be part of the budget, so you have some oversight over what we're doing, or at least we'll be able to see what we're doing and question us as to what we did with it.
Yeah.
But it only can be used for something that we would bond, and that would be a big project something on the order of the parking lot.
Yep.
It can be used for us, we had anything above 25,000 we can utilize it for. But again, the School Capital Improvement Committee would bring it to school committee and they would have the last vote. So we didn't really have, everybody at the table with the school committee members would have the full discussion of what we were doing next. What's the next priority? So we set it based on priority and the needs for the district.
I think it's extremely smart. I mean, we as a municipality have several stabilization funds, and you're talking about the challenge of having a regional, district where if some great life and safety threat happens, where do you go short of having all of these emergency meetings, which is not only time-consuming, costly, difficult, but also may not succeed. And then what do you do? So I applaud you for doing it. I think it's really smart to be putting away money for capital. It's one of the things we're trying to be better at here, and working toward. It's tough on a tight budget, but it's really important. So I applaud you for doing it.
Thank you.
Yep, I agree.
And for the first year, you're targeting 250,000. We're about just over 9,000. Be our share.
Yeah, Berlin share, based on that figure that you have, I think if you go back a couple of slides.
Page 12.
Yeah,
Telephones.
right there, yep. Yeah, so in the first column there, you'll see under capital improvement fund, it says 9,078, yep. And like I mentioned, for some reason, if the stabilization fund didn't get approved, it would be in the operational budget, but we would have to spend it within that fiscal year. And again, that's not the purpose we're looking for. Trust me, we have plenty of things to to be able to use it for each year, if we really had to. But like I mentioned, I just mentioned a plasma cutting table that's $40,000, right? And luckily, Perkins funding, which is federal funding, the state had additional monies that they allocated per district. And that was the number they allocated for us, so we were able to purchase that from Metal Fabrication. But that's a program, like I mentioned, that works. It's all day. It runs all day, and then it runs pretty much 4 days a week at night, and then every other Saturday on the weekends. So they're getting their usage out of that piece of equipment. So, any other questions?
Oh, very thorough.
Yeah, sounds good.
Excellent. Well, anytime you want to come over for a tour, see what we're doing. Or I should say, we talked about the 50th anniversary, and Lynn, we gave you some accolades. I kind of used some numbers you probably wouldn't have liked, but I know you started in 81, right? So you're our longest sitting.
It was 82, but who's counting?
Okay. I'm thinking of the way the fiscal years run,
But it was after I went on the zoning board of appeals.
right. Okay. So, and you're still on that, right? So, interestingly enough, if you do come to tour, the first representative from Berlin, who's now passed, right?
Well, he moved out of town,
Right.
and I agreed to take it in October, November, until an election could be held, and I got hooked.
There you go. So Dean Goodwin was the first school committee member
Right.
from Berlin. So his wife is still alive, and it just so happens that his wife is good friends with one of our graduates, who's also an electrical wiring instructor. And somehow they got talking about the 50th anniversary, and she said, "Wait right here." And she came out and brought him out a shovel. So it's one of the groundbreaking shovels from when the school was built.
Wow.
Not shiny anymore, but rusty. And when they moved, they did a lot of gardening and planting. And I guess she had said to Dean at one point in time, "Hey, I'd really like to garden with you, but all your shovels are way too tall for me." She was a smaller woman in stature, so large in stature, smaller in size. And so he said, "Wait a second." So he went and got the shovel that had been just sitting up, right? And she said, "I can't use that. That's the groundbreaking. It's a Vogue school. They'd love that you're working with your hands on it, so just go ahead and use it." So she's donated it back to us. It's in a time capsule right in the front of the school with some of the initial pictures and stuff. So if you ever want to come back over and take a look, it's pretty impressive. And again, wherever we go and wherever we meet graduates. So
Yep.
it's had a legacy. And thanks to Lynn for all of her dedication and service once again now that she's here. And then again to the community of Berlin for support. And obviously we try and do what we can for campus community projects for you folks as well to offset costs. You know, we did the senior center last year with our painting and designing technology folks that did all the common areas. I know we did the artifact, the building over here a couple years back. So if there's any projects that come up and they work in the schedule, we're happy to help. Right now our carpentry, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and painting and design students are in Southborough, adding an addition to their senior center.
Cool.
So yeah,
Nice.
so that's been a long time planning, but yeah, anytime let us know. We'll be happy to send those folks back. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Thank
you.
And thank you, Lynn.
Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you as
Finally,
well.
I've talked to you before.
Yes, nice to meet you in
You
person.
called me asking for that, assessment, I'm like, it's fake numbers, but I'll give them to you.
I'm cool with that. I know it's gonna change.
It will, it doesn't generate.
No,
What's the Minuteman thing? What's that? What's the assessment you had to do?
What was the assessment for?
When was it?
Oh, that would have been, so I was there 19 years. So I got to think about what my role was at the time when that happened. So I want to say that was around 2010 time period.
Okay, because that's when I first moved to Arlington.
Oh, okay. You probably then remember hearing
Yeah.
what's this additional cost and what's this meeting for?
Now I understand what it was.
Yeah, it was not good, to tell you. I mean, it was interesting. And part of it, too, is if you know anything about the plumbing and electrical fields, right, they usually have wooden walls, right, because as they're doing their piping and putting electrical boxes in and things of that nature, after a while they want to be able to, you know, replace the boards that are on it. So you needed a system, but it had to be a system that had fire-rated, cement board that was for it. But they had to be freestanding because the trades hall was so tall. There's no way they could put struts from the ceiling down, so they had to come up with a system with the architects to do it so that it could be freestanding with little legs, basically, that stuck out in order for it to stay up. So that cost a lot of money, too, just trying to figure out how to do that. And then the other thing, so certain things couldn't be stationary because it didn't have sprinklers. So if you can imagine, in the carpentry department, they used to do, they would put in doors, and they would put in walls, and they would put in cabinets, and things of that nature. Well, they had to build basically the corner of a room on wheels so that you could technically move it and roll it out. Or it had to be pegged so it could be, at the end of the year, removed every year, because there were no sprinklers in that shop in case there was a fire. So, yeah, lots of challenges. Luckily, we're not anywhere in that boat anymore. We're in a good spot. So.
thank you very much.
Thanks
Thanks
very
for
much.
coming a week
All right.
early. Really
If you have
appreciate
any other
it.
questions, follow up. Happy to come back.
Thank you.
All right?
Thank you so
Thanks so much.
Go over and have lunch.
There you go. Yeah, we'll have a lunch. All right.
Have a good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Good to see you.
So then probably just move on to another quick subject on the, regarding the Berlin Boylston schools that, so Boylston has reached out specifically to Nancy and Carol, as I understand,
Yes,
for attending their meeting on, well, Monday, the 12th, right?
yes.
And they will be attending, but we haven't heard what the school, if any school committee members will attend.
That's
Correct.
the Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday?
FinCom.
FinCom meeting.
FinCom.
FinCom meeting, yes.
But they also reached out to me. Nancy invited me to come to the school budget committee meeting on Friday, at which the preliminary level budget will be presented. I will be attending. I blocked off my whole morning.
That's at Tonto at 10 a.m.
10 a.m. over at Tohoto. And I will certainly bring back information for next week. And I'm happy to have been invited and hope we can continue to have further conversations from there.
I'm confused, but I'm easily confused. So do we have a date for their presentation here?
No.
Okay. Then I'm not confused. Okay.
It's one of the things I would like to, if it's okay with you all, to bring up on Friday when I'm there, should I have the opportunity. From what I understand, this is the preliminary presentation of their level services budget that will go to the larger the larger school committee, or the full school committee, on February 27th. And so I would like certainly to nail down a date, by which they can come here. But last I heard was sometime after February 27th.
Is this, you're talking school? Okay.
From
'cause-
Boylston. Yep.
Yeah, because I sat down at that coffee thing. Good conversation. Got to know Carol a little bit more. Mr. Campbell. I know him because my boys are over there. And seems like there's some things from Boylston. I'm willing to sit down with some key players over there. Sounds like you talked about the Capitol. Seems like the elementary school has a lot. It's from
In
the
Boylston,
1950s.
yeah.
The roof and just overall. I think they're doing the MSB.
MSBA. Yep.
Yeah, they are. And then it sounds like BMS, it does need the AC. I don't know if that's in the budget yet, but that was the capital stuff they
Well,
talked
that's
about.
the problem. I was sitting as a liaison on the capital committee. They never submitted anything. The school never submitted, so we
There's
had
no
no
capital request from the schools.
Yes, so
to
we
the, to the capital planning committee, right?
Yes, so we basically had to take our vote at the end of January on all the presented requests. We
Right.
had gone through the list.
That's your statutory timeline.
Yeah, and so we couldn't vote on anything because we never got the information. And as I brought up before, because I'm reminding you of your idea of doing the debt exclusion,
Yep.
and you've been trying to get, or you had asked for the information you needed to start that process.
I did.
And do we still have time to do it, or is it too late now to try to get it done?
I don't know. I have a call on Monday with town council.
Mhm.
I wanted to wait till after Friday when I had
Okay.
at least some information to
Okay.
hopefully go off of, because even though I did request that capital information, 2 weeks ago? When did we meet with Cap, and when did Capital take the votes? I think it was two
It was in
weeks ago.
January.
Yeah, and I emailed them immediately and said, by the way, Capital had to take their votes tonight. We still hadn't received anything, they said, oh, we'll get you something right away. Haven't received anything yet. I understand that it needs to be vetted through the school committee, through the process that they have.
Yeah.
But they know that process. This is how we've done it every year. The only thing we've received was verbal information given at a meeting on October 26th, then they invited us to come to a school committee meeting, and it was no handouts, just a verbal kind of where we heard maybe $800,000 for a roof and $400,000 for air conditioning. I've not seen anything on paper in terms of concrete numbers or estimates or requests, if you will. So after hopefully I get some more information on Friday, I want to have that conversation with town council, because we are running up against our deadlines, and they simply may be too late for some things. I just need to understand what they're doing before I can really ask the question. It's kind of a chicken and egg scenario, right?
Yeah.
You guys were so fantastic, I want to come back and spend more time.
Oh,
Pick up my
excellent.
computer. Sorry.
We're a fun crowd, what
So
can I
there's
say?
a committee for Boylston, right?
I wasn't running that fast.
I had my eye
Right, but a school committee one too, right?
Yes, well,
No, it's
Maybe
one
like
school
doing
committee for
myself.
both towns.
there's 3 members
Nice to see
from
you
each
again.
town.
Oh,
Take that
okay.
as stabilization fund.
In the old days, there used to be, they separate school committee, well, basically it was 3 members that covered Boylston Elementary,
Okay.
3 that covered BMS, before we had the full regionalization, and then those same 3 combined together for 6 to cover Tohoto. Now they're covered the entire thing once we went to full regionalization.
So we're all talking to the same people.
Okay, yeah, because when I was talking, they were talking about a committee over in Boylston. I think 4 out of the 5 resigned. I don't know what committee that is, but it seems like it's a committee that makes decisions.
The
And
town of Boylston?
yes, that's what I got out of it. Again, I don't.
Interesting.
4 out of 5.
Well, a
resigned.
school-
I think, yeah, I don't know. That's what I remember hearing.
Okay.
But I have no problem sitting down, just talking with players over there because I've done large scale construction just to see what's going on over there.
Well, I'm
With
sure
the
you
help
find out
with
from
the
April.
schools.
Right?
Yes, so as I think you discussed a bit last week, we are meeting again next week, actually, with myself and April, who is the town administrator in Boylston.
Okay.
Scott and Howard Drubner, who is the FinCom chair, and Chris Keefe and Matt Meekum, the select board chairs in both towns. So the
Okay.
6 of us have formed our own informal, just sort of like, let's just say what's going on so we're all on the same page kind of thing. Where no decisions are being made. We're just sharing information.
Okay.
It's just to keep everybody on the same page so we know, what's going on between the two towns. And it seems that they start their budget process a little bit later than ours, but they did extend that invite to Carol and Nancy to come on the 12th of February, and I understand they're coming. Not sure about the school committee, like you said.
Yeah, I looked it up on the website. I think it's like the meeting starts at 6:30, and I think they have the school board or school committee scheduled for 7:50.
Okay.
I can only report that my years on the school committee, the presentation was the superintendent, the finance person, and the chair of the school committee that came. That was it.
I don't think it's a presentation. I think it's the administration coming to have a discussion with the FinCom was the impression that I got.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe they would not come here but go there. That doesn't really make any sense to me.
I mean, do we want to have one person attend? Just let them know that we can, or at least let Boylston know that if it'd be okay to have somebody, the finance committee, attend the meeting.
I think someone,
I can't do Friday.
you're all looking.
Well, no, this is Monday.
I can probably show
Monday
up.
at 6:30?
I was going to say, I would
Yeah, I
totally
can't.
volunteer, but
Somebody's
it's literally
working.
the first Monday in 5 weeks I don't have a select board meeting, so
And I think
I was hoping to see
Sorry,
my
is it,
husband.
is it at 6:30?
Actually,
I said
is-
6:30.
so are they actually meeting though on Monday? Actually, I just forgot. It's
Is that
President's
a posted
Day.
meeting?
The 19th.
Oh.
They might
19th.
Well, that's the
not
19th is
That's the
President's
19th.
Day, yeah.
Not this one. coming
Oh,
up.
that's right, it's President's Day.
Yeah.
That's the one.
And at the select board meeting, the select board members were discussing the possibility of attending as well.
Yeah, it's an open public
Yeah.
meeting, so anyone is more than welcome to attend.
Okay, I'll try and attend. I mean, Monday is, getting to Boylston is not a problem.
Is
And
it-
6:30, you said?
Is it
6:30.
at the Boylston Town offices or is it Tohoto?
No, let me see.
I believe it's going to be
How
at the
about if I
Boylston.
look it up?
From Howard.
Boylston Town, it's on the website, and I actually, oops.
He says 12th of February.
Actually, I probably won't be attending. Just realized that's my wife's birthday.
Ooh,
Yeah.
good call.
Good
I might see somebody else.
As soon as you see the date, we didn't mention the date until you looked at
And then
it.
it comes up.
Yeah,
So,
It was just Monday before.
yeah, it was. We're just covering for you, don't worry.
13 though.
So Carol did get back to me.
13 is what our meeting is with the two.
It's a reply
select
to
board.
that email. Okay, I follow.
So this, I just pulled it up. It's 6:30 at the Boylston Town Hall, the Ward Nichols Conference Room, 221 Main Street, Boylston.
So
You said
it's
you would be able
Boylston
to-
Finance
Think you'd be able
Boylston
to?
Finance
Yes, you'd be
Committee
able to
meeting.
attend.
On Monday.
Yeah, they got the Board of Selectmen, Town Clerk, Assessors, Board of Health, Police, School Board at 7:50, whoever said that, yeah.
I think
Okay.
what I'll,
Well, we have Julie that she can
Okay,
attend.
and I was
That's
going to say,
good.
I'll, depending on what kind of information I receive on Friday, I can make a determination if,
Yeah.
need to go on Monday.
Yeah.
I think if it's your first Monday off,
It really is. I mean, my poor husband, we haven't even been married 2 years, and I think he might, divorce me for never being
yeah,
home.
take the day.
So, Kristen, are we even sure? It says school board, which is not a thing. So are we even sure that they're going to be there?
So the email I'll tell you the email we received. It just says the Boylston FinCom extended an invite to the school department, Carol and Nancy,
Okay.
to attend one of our FinCom meetings. Carol has since reached out and asked if Megan could attend, and of course, since these are public meetings, we asked them to come and talk about where they are on a preliminary budget. That's all I got.
So they haven't accepted it yet.
So
So
you
it
can,
could be the committee chair.
No, they have accepted. Carol and
Oh,
Nancy
okay.
have accepted, yes.
So the school district has accepted. We don't know
The
if the chair of
administration.
the school committee is going
Correct.
to show up.
Correct.
right.
Well, yeah, keep me posted, and
Will do.
she got back to me, and I'll sit down with the
Julia,
Boylston people.
I owe you.
Figure it out.
And the next topic is, well, first go to the meetings. We have nobody listed for next Wednesday.
We do not.
So is there any expectation we would have anybody on there? And do we want anything we want
Does
to
anyone
cover?
want to move up?
It's Valentine's
So
Day.
it is Valentine's Day.
Yes.
I think could probably skip the meeting. I'm not really trying to get like 2 dates with my husband. That would be too much.
Do you ever consider inviting him to these meetings?
He has no filter, so I don't know how well it would go.
Actually, I can think of a day would be good for him to be here with no filter.
Well, you let me know, and I'll make sure he's in attendance. The only thing I was thinking for next week, if we met, was to start going through the budget items that the select board had voted on, but they're the rather small, low-hanging fruit items. I don't know that they would take more than a half an hour to go through, and we could certainly do that at a future meeting.
Let's
So
go for a future meeting.
Yeah,
that works
sounds
for
good.
me.
Okay, so,
We get a week. Oh my god.
well, what I can do though is I can leave it up for now, just so that if something happens and we have
Yeah.
to meet,
Exactly. Just leave it up, and
Okay.
you can cancel it.
cancel, yeah, because it's
Yeah.
much harder to.
To take it down. No, that's
Yeah.
true.
I'm
Yes.
sending everybody a link to that FinCom, the Boylston FinCom meeting,
Cool.
so you have all the details of
Great, thank you.
who's ever.
Good. Yeah. Be good.
I think we just have one more evening of presentations, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's the following one.
So recreations, CP, what's CPA?
Community Preservation Act.
Oh, okay.
So, on the school committee, this is, I think you could probably deduce this. This is out of the item from last week, but this is
saw
the
that.
governor's local aid. Berlin-Boylston from fiscal '24 regional school district. Fiscal '24 to '25, the school aid is up roughly 200,000, but the transportation is down roughly 200,000. So I think it's about flat.
The
You know, if
reimbursement.
anybody wants to.
Is that the one you sent us in the email?
Well,
This is a different one.
I sent you. I
got the Excel
state
sheet. Yep.
reports.
Thank you for
on
that.
And this is just something that came out in the local news, and there's a little commentary from like Clinton and stuff. So I just found it. I'm trying to clip anything that comes out on the schools.
Clinton has
Yeah,
to,
it pretty much comes down
a
to
$1 million shortfall from
They
the
do.
state.
Yeah. I mean, they're not regional, so they can. Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty awful.
Yeah.
All right, and next, go to the next subject, which is hybrid meetings. So,
I
Does
feel
that
like
literally
I
mean
might
we don't come in?
get tomatoes
Well,
thrown at me.
what it
I
means
mean, I'm
is,
just across the parking lot. I'm just like, you know.
but basically what it means is right now, even the members of the audience have to come in. Everybody has to come in here, even though not necessarily any individual planning to be missing from the committee, that we would be in one of the other two rooms, probably that room across the hall, and it would just be set up, and we'd have to go through the process. Once we get used to it, it won't be difficult. And then anybody from the audience, people in town to want to physically show up. And likewise, if for some reason somebody here, something came up but you couldn't physically be here, but you could call in, you could do that also.
So, and also the presentation would show through the computer
Yep.
to everybody. So actually, when they record it, they can see it without the issues that we were having here.
Okay.
My only thinking on that was just because these meetings are so important, and I've been trying to advertise them at every select board meeting for the past 2 months, saying, hey, You guys have questions on the budget, please come out. We're here Wednesday nights, every Wednesday at 7:30, and wanting to get folks out. And maybe, we're kind of on the late end of it for this year, but I just think that this is a really important group that, folks may want to participate and ask questions, but may not want to actually come up here and sit in the audience, because they're not all brave like Lynn. So,
Well, I know the ZBA meets, is utilizing the Zoom webinar.
Are you using Zoom or hybrid?
Zoom.
Well,
We use Zoom webinar.
So you're not doing a hybrid?
Hybrid is we sit here and
We
you're
sit-
and it's live.
No, we're not doing that. We're gonna do it at Assabet, okay? We're starting to, one of the things we have is, the microphones, whether or not we need to get some microphones in order to do that.
Yeah, it was a whole setup
But
we
it
had to
has
do.
increased the number of people who attend the ZBA meetings. And I think sometimes people are a little nervous about showing up at a meeting. And there is some anonymity to being on a Zoom call, but you can make your voice heard if you choose to. But generally you aren't seen or whatever.
Right, and you can put in whatever name you want, so no one even knows who you are.
And the other thing is, you can put it on YouTube, and, people can view it later on if they aren't available that night.
but we
Or
do
if your
get it.
recollection isn't good.
We still get it recorded here
Yeah.
for on YouTube. But, so do we want to just do it then in
options.
2 weeks? We just have to reserve that room, right?
Yeah, you just
I'm assuming
write-
the one across here, because
Well-
that's usually
Well,
taken.
well,
on
Mike
our
thinks,
nights.
well, then, yeah, if we can't use that room, can we get that room set up like this?
Yeah.
Because
I can
the way
ask
it's
Ken.
set up now is really hard if you have more than a few people on that table.
Yep, that's true. Yes, I would just need to remember to let Ken know. But yes, we could.
The 21st looks open on the calendar for
Okay.
7:30.
How about the room 218 while you're up? Do you mind?
No.
Thank you.
I have to say, I
Couple
really
work.
appreciate being able to sit across from people.
I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And to
Well,
be able
because
to
when I
talk.
was in the capital planning, we didn't have that many people, but it was really awkward at that table. It
You're
was
right.
really hard to, even though like some people tried to sit across, there just wasn't enough space.
Yeah, and I didn't realize it till we actually tried to have a meeting with more than 3 people at that table, and it was awkward. I like the setup in 218. I think if we could use 218, that setup works better for this type of group.
Conservation has it on the 21st.
see, that's
Yeah,
the
7
problem.
o'clock.
Yeah,
Okay.
So whatever
So-
setup is, you prefer to have that set up also in this
Yeah.
room over here?
Yeah, or this type. Yeah, it's almost the same as this one, except I think it's 3 tables wide in that room.
Are we going to do it? Shall I put it on the
Yeah,
calendar?
why don't you put it down?
and
on there.
I'm not sure, we should be asking the presenters, because I actually like having the presenters around the table with you instead of away.
I do like that.
Because I
set it
feel
up,
like
though, over there.
we're having more of a discussion
Yeah.
about the,
Yeah.
Yeah,
rather than, they're on the line.
they're in the firing squad.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's a conversation
Yeah,
rather than a presentation and a response.
Yeah.
It's less formal, which maybe it's nice, right?
It's like
and
you're
I
at your
get
kitchen
that.
table, basically.
Yeah.
I
Rather
feel,
than an inquisition.
yes,
under the bright
exactly.
lights.
No, I'm the only one who has to be subjected to that, so you guys get off the hook there.
We're on that paper calendar.
Okay.
Just,
so if
and
you
we
all
can
want
always
to-
take it off. You can always just,
What is that, 227?
So you'll just have to provide, will you provide the information to Julia on what's the,
I was
the
going to say, I'll have
links
to
and
change
stuff
the
like
room
this?
number.
We would have to change the room number, but I don't know. I mean,
I just, somebody has to give me the posting information to put in the agenda before the 48 hours.
Yes. So the trick is you typically would have to, whoever's doing the agenda would email Dee, and she gives you a Zoom link to drop in. So you can email her like even
Okay.
now, and she'll get you a Zoom link.
Yeah, just, as long as we have the Zoom link, can place it in there as soon as you have it.
Contact cable too.
What is Dee's?
Oh yeah, we have to tell cable too.
What is Dee's?
Selectmen at Town of Berlin.
Oh, the one that they want to change.
Not the hybrid one, but yes.
And who on cable or what? Is there a
Cable.
separate-
It's cable access at townofberlin.com.
All right, why don't you just put cable access, CC them on that email.
Okay.
That's perfect. I mean, and I don't want to make it sound like it's something we have to do, because I understand your point. So I didn't mean to like jump the gun, but
the one advantage, is we can start learning the process on it, because otherwise something could come up and, one or two of us are not available suddenly, or worse yet, three of us and aren't available, but somebody could be available, so have a meeting, and then we're scrambling, figuring out how it is.
True. Unfortunately, there's a lot of illness still going around too. So if somebody was ill but didn't want to come in, but could still participate, that's always a benefit. Or out of town.
Yeah, I'm not available on the 28th. I'm going to be in the UK. This is not a good time, and in the UK, it's not a good time of day.
Yeah.
So I will not,
What is it?
Yeah,
like
5 hours
You don't
ahead.
think
Yeah.
so?
in the morning?
I will not be attending the meeting, even though I'm a night owl. It isn't. I have some stuff I have to do in the morning, so I can't be up in the
I
meeting.
guess you're excused.
That is my excuse. I'm sticking to it.
It's valid.
That's good to know that you're at least, that you're out.
Not here on the
other people
28th,
have.
so if everybody else is here, you won't miss me. It'll be fine.
Oh, are you kidding? Of course we will miss you.
I was hoping you'd say that.
Julie, it's room 227, if you're changing the room number. And when Dee changed the select board meetings to hybrid, she had a little trouble changing the room number, and I think Eloise might have, or James might have had to do it.
I haven't had trouble changing room numbers.
Okay, we had an issue. I don't remember what it was.
But sometimes, as I've said before, sometimes I have trouble posting because it's a really clunky system, and sometimes you're not sure if it actually did what you thought it did.
Yeah.
So when you're used to going through things very quickly now with 21st century websites,
Right.
and then you get back on that one, it's like, oh, I've got to, to update the minutes, I have to do 2 steps. But to
Right.
change the meeting, I do 1 step. And I know this, but it's like very weird that I have to update the meeting first to get the next page to upload the minutes.
It's kind of like DOS. It's like nice and clunky
Close.
back in the day.
It may have been.
Yeah, or like dial-up.
AOL.
Well, the good thing is, if for some reason there was an issue with the meeting numbers, considering the meeting rooms are just across from each other, I'm sure you can just do a posting and saying it's right next door.
You can. You can.
It's not like we're sending them to another part of town and they'll never get back in.
I think the
time.
problem is if you don't have the Zoom link up.
If you
Yes,
don't have
we got to get the
link,
Zoom
yeah.
link, and Dee can definitely get that for you
Yeah.
right away. So.
All right. Any other business? All right. I guess we have motion
Motion
to
to adjourn.
adjourn. Second.
Third.
Yep. We're done.